Hi, and welcome back to the History Hut. I'm Jim. This is Dr. K, and when we last spoke, we were talking about the military techniques of the Mongols.
We were indeed. Okay, so one of the things that's kind of unusual is the amount of stuff that the Mongol soldiers, I guess, took with them. Each soldier had 60 arrows and 2 bows, and they had 4 horses, so they'd be on one, and then they would have 4 fresh mounts with them. A shield, a repair kit, you know, and some dried food, probably in their saddlebag. And they wore light leather armor with little bits of metal all over it, so that's quite interesting. Small pieces of iron sewn in, and then underneath all of that, they wore silk to make sure that any of their wounds were clean wounds. Well, that's what they said anyway. So you've got these big, roughy, tough,
probably just because it's
Mongol
comfortable
guys, yeah, with the silk underwear on, you know, feeling good while they're out there on the plains. They're like, oh yeah, that feels so good against my skin. So they did that, of course, because if an arrow pierced their armor, when they pulled it out, the silk came out as well, so it kept the wound clean. It's kind of interesting. They used all sorts of novel things on the battlefield, like smoke bombs, noise, make as much noise as they could with their drums and whistles, and they would have torches and flags. And so these were both to confuse the enemy and also so they could communicate, so they could, you know, change strategies. They have great mobility on the battlefield as well, which is also cool. But we know that, you know, they could also ride 140 miles a day, so that's amazing. They broke all of the rules of warfare by attacking in the winter. They had the only successful attack on Russia. You know, Napoleon didn't quite make it, Hitler didn't quite make it, but the Mongols did, so really good at that. Women and children were enslaved in any area where they attacked. And the other thing is that they would take back all the artisans. So Karakorum, their headquarters, becomes this amazing place where you've got, you know, glass blowers and metal workers, just unreal. So they would actually try and find the artisans, the artisan quarters in the cities, and identify them and bring them home. But for the men, you either died on the spot because you hadn't given in, or you surrendered, and you'd think, oh, well, that's okay, then I've surrendered, I'll be fine. And then they would use you as a human shield for the next attack on the next place. So yeah, kind of brutal. Their weapon of choice, and probably the weapon that makes them so successful, is a thing called the Recurve Bow. And the Recurve Bow could fire over 350 yards. And
wow.
They practiced, they had stirrups, so they would stand up in the stirrups, and they practiced shooting the Recurve Bow when the horse's hoofs were off the ground. And so seemingly that gave them more accuracy. I haven't actually tried it myself, so I don't know. But, you know, really great aim, and they didn't like hand-to-hand fighting. They kind of do everything on horse. And in the secret history of the Mongols, again, there's a record of Genghis's 16 military tactics, and some of them are kind of repeats. I don't think they're really 16 of them at all, but number 4 is called the throw into disorder tactic, and that's where the Mongols would herd oxen and wild horses into the enemy lines to cause, you know, chaos, panic, and confusion. The other one is number 6, the confusing and intimidating tactic, and that's where they would they'd use mounted stuffed dummies, small children and women, put them on horses and then put them out, so it looked that the army was actually bigger than it was. So do all sorts. One of the other ones was they would take the 4 fresh mounts and they would tie like the equivalent of a broom to the back of them, and those horses would kick up all sorts of dust, and so it just looked like they were endless on the horizon. So people would be like, oh, it's the Mongol horde, and they always people always overestimated how many of them there were. They would say, oh, it was like a billowing sea, there must have been 400,000 or 300,000, and you know, to be fair, they had about 100,000 in the field probably, but people were always terrified by that, and the speed of their attack. You know, they would kind of arrive and disappear, and people would be like, who were those masked men? What just happened here? So really interesting. So armed with all of that, the tactics, the strategies, the mounted stuffed dummies, the extra mounts kicking up the dust, the torches.
That was me on Thanksgiving, a stuffed dummy.
A stuffed dummy. Good. Oh, I'm glad your parents fed you. That's good. So they're kind of all ready to go then with all of this. So you've got the Yasa, this unification, and then you've got all these great techniques, and you've got the recurve bow. So you're ready to roll. Once they're all set, who do they go after? The first group, you think, well, maybe they would go after the Jin because they're just right below them, and that's China, and he probably wants to get in there. But he doesn't go after the Jin at first. He practices. You've got all your military techniques down. You still have to practice. So he practices, and he practices on my favorites, the Shishia. He goes to the Shishia in 1207. Tough customers at the best of times, and it takes him about 2 years of raiding before he can actually take them down. Gets tons of loot from the Shishia conquest, and then says to the Shishia, I might need some help in the future. You are going to have to provide me with some troops. And they go, okay, no problem. And of course, in 1220, he comes back and asks them for troops. And they go, I don't remember promising you any troops. And so he's like, oh, I'm taking you guys down. You know, come back in 1226 and finish them off. And it said that it's so awful that Shishia territory is turned into a kind of graveyard. So Shishia are the first ones that he attacks, and then after that success, he attacks northern China, which is controlled by the Jin, and the Jin are pretty cocky. You know, they're like, oh, nobody beats us. We're the ones that beat everybody else. Look at us. We took out the Sung, and so they still try and protect themselves because they still, you know, they've got the wall, and they've got a mountain garrison of about 70,000 soldiers, I think. But Genghis overruns their mountain garrison. They just come round the wall, recognizing that it has to end somewhere. Right. Come round the wall, overrun the garrison, take out about the 70,000 that are protecting it, and then head for Peking. But Peking is a new kind of challenge for him because it's a heavily fortified city with these massive walls. The walls are 40 feet high, and so he's kind of stuck outside it. The Chinese are inside lobbing out, you know, hot oil and stuff, and the Mongols are kind of outside going, okay, what do we do now? So they have to learn siegecraft, and they do that with, they get Chinese prisoners of war, and they get, you know, people that know that kind of stuff. So they're helped by the Chinese prisoners of war, and it takes them a long time, a couple of years, about 3 years, to actually take down Peking. And it's said that when they enter it, it's an absolute bloodbath. And they just kind of take everybody out, although the city had actually surrendered. And it takes them another 3 years, till about 1218, to take control of most of northern China. But in the meantime, you know, so he's taken out northern China, and he's got Peking, and he's already taken out the Shishia, and then he turns west. And this is the frightening part for anybody that is attached to the Middle East or the West. So he moves west to the Islamic territory of Muhammad Shah, and it's called the Kharazim state. And the Shah, Muhammad Shah, lived in Samarkand, and Samarkand, just the most incredible city, most incredible artisans there, just a kind of pleasure palace of this area. And there's a bit of debate about why Genghis Khan goes there. Either, and there's like two stories, either he sends an ambassador and says, I demand that you recognize me as the prince that all lies between all the oceans, or there are Mongol traders that go into that territory and they're killed. And either way, Genghis is like, yeah, never been west. Think I'll go. I might like it. You know, so heads out. He's outnumbered 2-1. Things like that never seem to bother them. But they start their campaign, and it lasts from about 1218 to 1221. It destroys absolutely everything in their path, and until they get to the town or the city of Bukhara, and Bukhara heavily defended. So he does something, again, that's totally interesting and kind of counterintuitive. He has his army, he divides it into 4, and he sends 3 parts of it directly at Bukhara, and the 4th part of the army he sends out behind through this what was thought to be an impenetrable desert, you know, no landmarks or anything. Nobody had been there for their holidays and made sandcastles and come back to talk about it. So they go through this uncharted desert, and they pop up 400 miles behind Bukhara. And of course, as soon as the people guarding Bukhara see this, they're like, oh no, and they give in. but it's a total shock, and he actually kills about 30,000 people in the central minaret in Bukhara, turns the mosques into stables, says to people, you must have done something wrong, because if you hadn't, God wouldn't have sent me, and I wouldn't have killed you, which is kind of, crazy. And there's another character as well, a guy called Subadai, who'd been with him right from the beginning, and he was one of his top generals. And so Subadai was given the task of tracking down Muhammad Shah, who by this time had taken off. So he was to just kind of track him down, but he, I guess, Muhammad Shah outsmarts everybody by dying, and so the Mongols can't catch him. But what Subadai does is he spends the next 2.5 years going on a 5,000-mile recce, a reconnaissance of the area of the Caspian Sea and what we would now consider to be modern-day Russia. So all through that Russian territory, and again, people there, they see these people come through. They're horrendous. They're scary looking, and they call them the Devil's Horsemen, and they wonder if they'll ever come back. They're like, oh, who were they, and what's happened? So really, really nasty stuff. Genghis returns to Shishia territory to sort them out because they hadn't provided the troops that he'd asked for, and he does sort them out, and then he's planning another campaign in 1227 when he dies, and of course that's at about the age of 72. We're still looking, I'm not, but other people are, looking for his grave, because he's buried with 40 of the most beautiful Mongolian women and lots of horses, and you would assume all the things that a world conqueror would need in the next life, so it would be an incredible hoard to find, but nobody's found it yet. So by 1227, the question is, what's next? Is this empire, this little thing that he's created already, is it strong enough to outlast him? Has he done enough, or is it too much kind of the personal rule? Is it just going to fall apart when he dies? And that's the big question for historians. So conclusions on Genghis: he is exceptionally talented, obviously charismatic, a great organizer. The fact that he lives till the age of 72 gives his rule a kind of stability. They're like, oh yeah, he's been here for a while. He develops this incredible military machine with these great tactics, just cracking, and he employed artisans from all the areas that he conquered, and this is probably why the DNA link is still so strong, because he sent all those women and children back to Karakorum, so obviously they would have another life there. He was keen to have his exploits recorded, because they're an illiterate people, so he wants the things to be kind of on the record, and of course that's where you get the secret history of the Mongols. And I think it's quite interesting that this area that he's taken over now is considered to be one of the most secure and safe areas in the world, because nobody wants to, the banditry and lawlessness on the Silk Road are gone, because nobody wants to cross the Mongols, because you've already seen what can happen to you if you do. So yeah, I mean, the big question then is, what comes after Genghis? That was what you were asking before. And they have to really decide on a method of succession. How do you choose the next leader? And really, although there are lots of possibilities, really he picks one of his sons. He picks his favored son, but everybody has to join in, and there has to be an election. So they do actually have elections for the great Khan, but in the first instance he picks Ogadai as his favorite, and says, yeah, Jochi's already dead, but his family's going to benefit from this new and expanded empire. So they choose election amongst his sons, and Ogadai is the one that wins out.
All right, well, we'll talk about post-Genghis Mongols in when we talk to you next time, and we'll see you there.
Okay, bye.